The order to execute Ethan Cole arrived before breakfast, printed on cream paper so expensive it seemed obscene against the rust-colored stain drying on his sleeve. Traitor, the file called him. Omega asset compromised. Sentence authorized. At the bottom waited the signature that mattered, and beneath it, one final instruction. Adrian Kane would carry out the execution himself. Ethan read the page upside down from the metal chair bolted to the floor. Nice stationery, he said. The guard beside him frowned. You think this is funny? No. I think somebody spent $40 to tell me I'm dying in a basement. The guard's hand tightened around Ethan's shoulder. Ethan did not flinch. Flinching gave men like that ideas. The steel door opened, and every sound in the room stopped. Adrian Kane entered without an escort. He did not need one. The guard released Ethan so quickly it almost looked like respect. Adrian wore a dark suit with no tie, his black hair still damp from the rain outside. Nothing about him was theatrical. That made him worse. Men who enjoyed being feared usually performed for it. Adrian simply expected the room to obey. His gaze moved once over Ethan's bruised cheek, his cuffed wrists, and the untouched glass of water on the table. Then he looked at the guard. Outside. Boss, the order says, I read it. The guard left. The lock clicked behind him. Ethan watched Adrian place the execution order on the table between them. No gun. No threats. Just paper. Somehow, that felt more final. Adrian sat across from him. Ethan Cole, 27. Records clerk for 3 affiliated businesses. Access to private shipping manifests, payment schedules, and internal communications. You memorized my resume. You transmitted protected information to a rival crew. 3 men died within 48 hours. Ethan's jaw tightened before he could stop it. Adrian noticed. Of course he did. That reaction, Adrian said. Guilt. You've already got a signed piece of paper. Why waste time asking? Because the paper tells me what you did. It doesn't tell me why. Ethan glanced at the execution order. Maybe your stationery budget doesn't cover motives. Something almost shifted in Adrian's expression. Not a smile. A brief failure to remain entirely carved from stone. It vanished quickly. You're not denying it. Would it matter? It would affect my assessment. You were ordered to kill me, not review my performance. Adrian leaned back slightly. He did not raise his voice. I decide what I was ordered to do. There it was. The reason grown men stepped out of his path. Not volume. Certainty. Ethan's pulse kicked harder, but he kept his hands still in his lap. Then decide. Adrian studied him for several seconds. Ethan had spent the last 2 days being shouted at, threatened, deprived of sleep, and asked the same questions in different words. Where had he sent the files? Who had paid him? Which rival had recruited him? He had answered none of them. Silence was the last thing that still belonged to him. Adrian reached for the evidence folder. The transfer came from your terminal at 2:13 a.m. Apparently I work late. Your access code was used. That does sound inconvenient for me. A security camera placed you in the records wing 12 minutes earlier. Ethan said nothing. Adrian opened another page. But the camera outside the server room lost power at 2:07. Ethan's eyes moved before he could stop them, not to the page, but to Adrian. The mistake lasted less than a second. Adrian caught it. You didn't know that was in the report, he said. Ethan settled back. I didn't know you could read. You're trying to irritate me. It's the only hobby they've left me. This time Adrian's mouth did move, barely. Then his attention dropped to the glass of water. Why haven't you touched it? Maybe I'm worried about the service. Adrian picked up the glass, drank from it, and set it back down. Satisfied? Ethan stared at him. The gesture was small, unnecessary, and completely at odds with the man described in every whispered story he had ever heard. Adrian Kane did not reassure prisoners. He did not prove anything to them. Ethan hated the tiny spark of relief that followed. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people careless. He took the glass anyway. His cuff chain scraped the table as he drank. Adrian watched the movement, not with triumph, but calculation. The transmission lasted for minutes, he said. The stolen files totaled nearly 6 gigabytes. Ethan set the glass down. Congratulations on your math. Your terminal's network speed could not have sent that volume in 4 minutes. Silence changed shape between them. Ethan kept his face still, but Adrian had already seen enough. The accusation was no longer seamless. It had a crack. Small, perhaps, but real. Adrian closed the file. Who are you protecting? Ethan's fingers tightened around the glass. You assume I'm protecting someone. You accepted a death sentence without bargaining. Men protecting themselves bargain. Maybe I'm tired. You're afraid, Adrian said. But not of dying. Ethan met his eyes. For the first time, Adrian did not look like the man holding the execution order. He looked like a man who had found a problem he could not force into place. Ethan set the glass down carefully. You should follow your orders, Mr. Kane. Adrian rose, taking the folder but leaving the signed execution sheet on the table. I usually do. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand near the lock. That is why I checked them first. When the door closed, Ethan remained alone with the paper that said he would die. Nothing had changed. The cuffs were still tight. The sentence was still signed. Adrian Kane still had the authority to end his life. But now the Mafia boss had seen the flaw in the verdict, and Ethan knew a flaw was sometimes all it took to bring down something built to look unbreakable. Adrian did not return to the interrogation room. He went upstairs with Ethan's file under one arm and the uncomfortable knowledge that the case had just stopped behaving like a case. By 8:17 a.m., rain pressed against the windows of his office, turning the city into a blur of gray glass and brake lights. Adrian stood behind his desk, while Victor Hale, his head of security, pulled the transmission report onto the wall monitor. Run it again, Adrian said. Victor glanced at him. I've run it 3 times. Then the 4th should be easy. Victor exhaled through his nose, but restarted the analysis. 6 gigabytes. For minutes. A terminal that could not have transferred more than 1.5 under ideal conditions. The official report called the discrepancy a logging error. Adrian had approved executions over less ambiguous evidence. That thought stayed with him longer than he liked. Could the data have been staged on the network earlier? He asked. Possible. Could Ethan have done it? Possible. Adrian looked at the word on the report, confirmed. That wasn't my question. Victor went still. Adrian's men knew the difference between his impatience and his anger. This was neither. It was worse. Not alone, Victor admitted. Not with the access we've documented. The first crack widened. Adrian opened the camera logs. The record's wing footage showed Ethan entering at 2:01 a.m., carrying a paper cup and rubbing one eye like a man losing an argument with exhaustion. At 2:07, the server corridor went dark. At 2:13, Ethan's credentials initiated the transfer. At 2:17, the transmission ended. At 2:19, Ethan appeared again, coming from the opposite end of the floor. Adrian froze the image. Where was he for 18 minutes? Blind spot. Convenient. For him, or for whoever killed the camera? Victor asked. Adrian's gaze shifted to him. Victor lifted both hands. You hired me to notice things. I hired you to notice them sooner. At 9:02, Adrian returned to the basement. Ethan was still in the same chair, though someone had replaced the water and left a protein bar on the table. It remained unopened. Ethan glanced at Adrian's empty hands. No ceremonial weapon? Disappointed? A little. The decor promised more drama. Adrian pulled out the chair across from him. Your terminal could not have transmitted the files. Ethan's expression did not change, but his shoulders lowered by a fraction. Sounds like a technical problem. It's a problem for the verdict. Careful. Someone might accuse you of independent thought. Adrian ignored that. You entered the records wing at 2:01. The server corridor lost power 6 minutes later. You appeared on camera again at 2:19, but from the east stairwell. Ethan's eyes sharpened. You checked the stairwell footage. You sound surprised. I'm surprised anyone checked anything. There was no triumph in his voice. Only fatigue. Adrian leaned forward. What happened during those 18 minutes? Ethan looked at the untouched protein bar. Nothing useful. 3 men died. Ethan's jaw flexed. I know. One of them had a 12-year-old daughter. The color drained from Ethan's face. He turned away too late. Adrian had expected denial, defensiveness, perhaps anger at the manipulation. Instead, Ethan looked sick. You knew him, Adrian said. Ethan's silence returned, but it was different now. Not a wall. A hand clamped over a wound. Adrian changed course. Did you profit from the transfer? No, the answer came instantly. First direct answer. Adrian noted it. Were you recruited by the Moretti crew? No. Did you knowingly send them the shipping routes? Ethan looked back at him. You're asking the wrong question. Adrian held his gaze. Give me the right one. For a moment, Ethan seemed close to speaking. Then footsteps stopped outside the door. His face closed. The lock turned, and Victor entered with a tablet. He did not look at Ethan. "Boss, Councilman Mercer is on the secure line. He wants confirmation the sentence will be completed by midnight." Ethan gave a quiet laugh with no humor in it. "There's your right question." Adrian stood. "What does that mean?" "It means somebody's in a hurry." Victor looked between them. Adrian took the tablet, but did not answer the call. "You know why? I know people don't rush clean decisions." That was more than Ethan had given him before. Adrian let the silence sit rather than crowd it. Ethan's eyes moved to the camera in the upper corner, then to Victor's tablet. A pattern. Not fear of Adrian. Fear of being heard by someone else. Adrian followed his gaze. "Victor, disable the room feed." Victor hesitated. "That violates protocol. So does fabricating bandwidth." The camera light went dark. Ethan stared at it for several seconds. Then he rubbed his thumb against the edge of the cuff. "There was an audio file," he said. Adrian did not move. "Where?" "I didn't say I had it. You said there was one. Past tense matters." Adrian's patience tightened, but he kept his voice level. "What was recorded?" Ethan's eyes met his. "Enough to make someone kill 3 men and blame a 4th. The room seemed smaller. Adrian heard the rain in the ventilation shaft, faint and steady. "Who made it?" "I don't know." "Who heard it?" Ethan looked toward the dead camera. "That's the part I'm trying not to answer." Victor's tablet buzzed again. "Mercer. Midnight." Adrian finally accepted the call, but kept his eyes on Ethan. "The review is ongoing," he said. The voice on the other end was sharp enough for Ethan to hear without the speaker. "There is no review. There is an order." Adrian looked at the execution sheet still lying on the table. "Then the order can survive a few questions." He ended the call before Mercer could respond. Victor stared at him. Ethan did too. Adrian picked up the protein bar and slid it across the table. "Eat." Ethan looked down at it. Was that concern or an order? A logistical preference. "You're very nurturing." Adrian almost smiled again, which was becoming irritating. "At midnight," he said, "they will expect proof that you are dead." Ethan's humor disappeared. "And what will you give them?" Adrian looked at the dark camera, the impossible transfer, and the first real lead hidden behind Ethan's fear. "An answer," he said. Then he left to decide whether finding it was worth being called disloyal himself. Adrian had 11 hours to prove the execution order was wrong, and the first thing he did was violate it. At 9:26 a.m., he entered the security office, placed Ethan's file beside Victor's keyboard, and said, "Move the prisoner." Victor stopped typing. "To where?" "The West safe room. That floor is restricted. So is executing a man with corrupted evidence." Victor lowered his voice. "Mercer ordered midnight confirmation. If we relocate Cole without authorization, this stops looking like a review." Adrian met his eyes. It stopped being a review when someone buried an impossible transfer inside a completed verdict. Victor glanced toward the closed office door. "And if the council asks?" "Tell them I assumed custody." That answer would not protect Victor, and they both knew it. Adrian added, "Put the decision under my name." Victor studied him for one long second, then reached for his radio. The choice was made. The consequence followed before Adrian left the room. His secure phone lit with 3 missed calls from Mercer and 1 message from a council number that had never contacted him directly before. Complete the order. No further delay. By 9:41, Ethan stood in the basement corridor with his wrists cuffed in front of him and 2 guards at his back. He looked from Adrian to the open elevator. "This seems optimistic. You're being moved. Somewhere with better stationery? Somewhere without a camera feed controlled by people outside this building." Ethan's expression sharpened. "You found something. You told me an audio file existed. That isn't the same thing." "No. It's the reason you're still alive while I determine whether you lied." One guard reached for Ethan's arm. Adrian stopped him with a look. "He can walk." Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. He stepped into the elevator without being touched, but he kept to the far wall, his eyes on the mirrored doors rather than Adrian. The West safe room was not comfortable, but it was not a cell. It had a narrow bed, a small table, a private bathroom, and a window reinforced with wire glass. Ethan paused just inside. "What's the catch?" "You remain confined." "There it is. No cameras. One guard outside. No one enters without my approval." Ethan turned. "Including you?" Adrian disliked how quickly the answer mattered. "Including me." Ethan looked at him more carefully. "And if I ask you to leave?" "I leave." That almost sounded civilized. Don't spread it around. Ethan's mouth twitched before he could stop it. The reaction was small, but it changed the room. For the first time, they were not separated by a table built for interrogation. They were simply two men standing near an open door, deciding what the other's word was worth. Adrian placed a prepaid phone on the table. No outside calls. It connects only to me and Victor. Ethan picked it up, turned it over, then set it down. A private line to my executioner. I feel special. You're difficult to impress. Try not threatening to kill me. I didn't issue the order. You're still holding it. Adrian accepted the hit because it was accurate. I need something verifiable. Ethan's humor faded. And I need proof that anything I give you won't go straight back to the people who built that file. You have none. Then we understand each other. Adrian crossed his arms. Set your terms. Ethan blinked, as if he had expected pressure, not negotiation. The room stays dark to outside surveillance. Victor is the only other person involved. No counsel access to anything I give you until you confirm it independently. You don't control counsel access. Then I don't talk. Adrian felt the old instinct rise, the urge to close every exit, force certainty, remove variables. It had kept men alive. It had also made him exactly the kind of man Ethan expected. Agreed, he said. Ethan's eyes narrowed. That easy. No. That necessary. Silence stretched. Then Ethan sat at the table and rubbed the reddened skin beneath one cuff. Adrian took out the key. Ethan's entire body tightened. Adrian stopped before touching him. May I? The question seemed to unsettle Ethan more than an order would have. After a moment, he held out his hands. Adrian unlocked the cuffs and stepped back immediately. Ethan rotated his wrists, watching him. You understand this doesn't mean I trust you. It means you agreed not to run. I didn't agree to that. Adrian looked at the reinforced window, then at the guarded door. Ethan followed his gaze and sighed. Fine. I agree not to attempt the world's least promising escape. Good. Your relief is touching. Adrian ignored the pull at the corner of his mouth. The recording. Ethan flexed his fingers once, then reached for the prepaid phone. Instead of dialing, he entered a string of numbers into the notes application. That's an archive index, he said. The audio was logged as a routine compliance call 3 days before the transfer. It disappeared from the main server after the killings. How do you know the index? Records clerk, remember? Glamorous work. Who can access the archive? Anyone with executive clearance. Adrian held his gaze. Including me. That's why I'm giving it to you. The sentence landed between them with more weight than Ethan seemed willing to acknowledge. Not trust. Not yet. But a measured risk. Adrian forwarded the number to Victor with one instruction. Offline search only. 37 minutes later, Victor called. Adrian answered from the hallway, leaving Ethan's door open behind him. The index is real, Victor said. The file was deleted, but the archive generated a backup checksum before removal. Can you recover it? Maybe. There's a physical mirror in the old compliance vault. How long? 2 hours if nobody notices. Less if they do. Adrian looked through the doorway. Ethan sat at the table, pretending not to listen. Do it. Victor hesitated. Boss, someone just requested the West Floor access logs. The alliance had lasted less than an hour before leaving a footprint. Adrian ended the call and stepped back into the room. Ethan read the answer in his face. They know I moved. They know someone did. And now, Adrian picked up the execution order, folded it once, and placed it in his inside pocket. Now we find the recording before they find a reason to remove the choice from both of us. Ethan looked at the open door, then at his uncuffed hands. He was still a prisoner. Adrian was still the man ordered to kill him. But the rules between them had changed, and somewhere inside the building, someone had already noticed. Someone had requested the West Floor access logs, and Adrian answered by locking the entire floor under his authority. The decision took less than 10 seconds. Its consequences arrived in under 2 minutes. Victor called from the compliance vault. Security just tried to override my clearance. Adrian stood in the doorway of Ethan's safe room, one hand around the prepaid phone. Can you still reach the mirror? Yes, but not quietly. Quiet stopped being useful. Ethan looked up from the table. That sounds healthy. Adrian ignored him. Recover the file. Bring it directly to me. Mercer's people are already moving. Then move faster. He ended the call. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You know, when most people say they're checking an order, they don't shut down half a building. Most people don't have someone deleting evidence inside it. Comforting distinction. Adrian stepped into the room. Victor may need your help identifying the correct backup. Ethan's expression tightened. You said no one else gets access to what I give you. Victor already has the archive index. That isn't what I meant. Adrian felt the familiar urge to make the decision for him. Time was short. The floor was compromised. Ethan had information they needed. Command would have been faster. Then tell me what you meant, he said. Ethan studied him, surprised again by the invitation. I meant no council access. No remote copy. No uploading it to your internal network. If the file is recovered, it stays offline. Agreed. And I verify it before you decide what it proves. Adrian's jaw tightened. You don't set the meaning of evidence. Neither does the person who wants me dead. That was accurate enough to be inconvenient. Adrian nodded once. You verify it first. The tension in Ethan's shoulders eased by a fraction. Trust, Adrian was learning, did not announce itself. It appeared in small physical surrenders, a hand unclenching, a breath released, a man choosing not to step farther away. A knock sounded from the hall. Ethan went still. Adrian moved between him and the door before he thought about it. It's Victor, came the voice outside. Adrian opened the door only after checking the hall. Victor entered carrying a black storage drive and a paper evidence sleeve. The mirror was partially wiped, he said. I recovered 3 fragments under the checksum. One matches the index Cole gave us. Ethan stood. You listened to it? No, Victor handed Adrian the drive. Per instructions. Adrian passed it directly to Ethan. Victor's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing. Ethan looked at the drive in his palm, then at Adrian. You're letting me hold it? You asked to verify it first. That wasn't permission to become reasonable. Don't get used to it. Victor made a sound that might have been a cough hiding a laugh. Ethan noticed and almost smiled. The moment lasted only a second, but it cut through the pressure cleanly. Then the lights flickered. Victor turned toward the hall. They're testing the floor controls. Adrian took the portable player from the evidence sleeve and set it on the table. Offline. Battery powered. No transmission capability. Ethan inserted the drive. His fingers remained steady until the file list appeared. 3 damaged entries. One carried the archive number he had memorized. He stopped breathing. Adrian saw it. That's the one. Ethan did not answer. Ethan. I know. His voice had lost its dry edge. He selected the file, but before pressing play, he looked at Adrian. If this is intact, you don't use it without telling me. If it proves you were framed, that is not what I asked. Adrian held his gaze. The order in his pocket felt heavier than paper should. I tell you first. Ethan pressed play. Static filled the room, followed by 3 broken seconds of a man's voice. Too distorted to understand. Then silence. The file ended. Victor swore under his breath. Ethan replayed it. Static. A clipped breath. 3 seconds of sound. Nothing more. The rest was overwritten, Victor said. Ethan removed the drive with more care than frustration required. No. The fragment length is wrong. Adrian watched him turn the player over. Explain. The archive index logged 12 minutes, 46 seconds. This recovery is 8 seconds. If the source had been fully overwritten, the checksum wouldn't match. Victor frowned. So another segment exists. Or this fragment was planted to make recovery look complete. Ethan moved to the table and pulled the protein bar wrapper toward him. Adrian had not noticed when he ate it. With a pen, Ethan wrote the checksum in a tight line of numbers, then divided it into blocks. Compliance backups used 2 mirrored sectors before the system update, he said. The main index points to the first. The second would be stored under the call's routing tag. Victor stared at him. That field isn't visible in the archive menu. It is if you know where the old software hides it. Adrian looked at Ethan's notes. Can you find it? Ethan met his eyes. I can tell Victor where to look. You're not going with him. The words came too quickly. Ethan's face closed. Adrian heard the mistake as soon as it left his mouth. Because the floor is compromised, he added. Not because I've decided for you. That sounded a lot like deciding. Adrian forced himself not to tighten his grip on the situation. Do you want to go? Ethan glanced toward the hall, where distant doors were opening and closing under unauthorized hands. Fear moved through his expression, brief and honest. Then he looked back at the drive. No, he said. I want Victor to go. I want the door locked after him. And I want you here until he returns. Adrian had expected suspicion. He had not expected to be included in the request. Done. Victor took the routing instructions and left. Adrian locked the door himself, then placed the key on the table within Ethan's reach. Ethan looked at it. Symbolic. Practical. You're bad at lying. I'm excellent at it. I simply chose not to. For the first time, Ethan smiled without hiding it. Small. Tired. Real. Adrian felt the room change again. The phone rang before either of them could examine what that meant. Victor's voice came fast. I found the second sector. The file is intact. Ethan's smile vanished. Adrian straightened. Can you bring it here? Not without crossing Mercer's team. They've taken the central corridor. Adrian looked at the clock. 11:18 p.m. 42 minutes until the council expected proof of Ethan's death. Secure the file, he said. I'll come to you. Ethan stood. You're leaving me here? The door locks from inside. Adrian pushed the key closer to him. No one enters unless you open it. Ethan looked at the key, then at Adrian. And midnight. Adrian took the execution order from his pocket. At midnight, they're going to ask me to choose. He folded the paper once more. This time, I intend to know exactly what I'm choosing between. At 11:21 p.m., Adrian left Ethan alone with the key, the dead camera, and 40 minutes of borrowed time. By 11:26, Mercer's men had sealed the central corridor. Adrian reached the west stairwell just as Victor stepped from the compliance vault with the recovered drive clenched in one hand. They know, Victor said. How many? 6 on this floor. More below. Council authorization? Mercer's. Adrian took the drive. Then they expect me to obey before I can listen. Footsteps sounded beyond the fire door. Victor looked toward them. What's the plan? Adrian slipped the drive into his inside pocket beside Ethan's execution order. We stop pretending this is an investigation. They crossed through a service passage and reached the private council chamber at 11:38. Mercer was already there with 4 senior members and twice as many armed men. The room had been prepared for judgment. A polished table, sealed evidence folders, and an empty chair positioned beneath a single overhead light. Ethan's chair. Mercer checked his watch. You're late. The order says midnight. Adrian remained standing. It does not say you own the minutes before it. Mercer's expression hardened. Bring coal. 2 guards moved toward the west floor. Adrian did not stop them. He had promised Ethan no one would enter unless Ethan opened the door. That promise was about to be tested in front of everyone. At 11:44, the guards returned with Ethan walking between them, uncuffed and furious. He saw Adrian first, then the room, then the drive-shaped weight beneath Adrian's jacket. They had a master key, Ethan said. Mercer glanced at Adrian. Your security arrangements were becoming inconvenient. Adrian's gaze stayed on Ethan. Did they touch you? Only their professional pride. The answer was dry, but Ethan's hands were tight at his sides. Adrian turned to the guards. Step away from him. Mercer laughed once. He is under a death sentence. And still under my authority. The guards obeyed Adrian. That hesitation, Mercer's men choosing Adrian's command over Mercer's stare, shifted something small but visible in the room. Ethan noticed. So did Mercer. Enough, Mercer said. He slid the cream execution order across the table. The Omega transmitted protected routes to the Moretti crew. 3 loyal men died. He refused cooperation. He concealed evidence. The council found him guilty. Carry out the sentence. Ethan stood beneath the light, his face pale but controlled. Adrian could see the pulse in his throat. He could also see that Ethan was watching. Him, not Mercer. Waiting to learn whether the last 4 hours had meant anything. Adrian took the order. The transfer report is false. One of the councilmen shifted. Mercer did not. A logging discrepancy. 6 gigabytes cannot move through that terminal in 4 minutes. Then he had assistance. The camera loss was initiated before his credentials were used. Mercer's mouth thinned. You were ordered to execute a traitor, not defend one. Ethan's expression changed at the word. Not fear. Recognition. The label was doing what it had always done, closing the room around him before he could speak. Adrian looked at the gun on the table. It had been placed there for him. Proof of obedience in steel and black polymer. Midnight approached in red numbers on the wall clock. 11:57. Mercer pushed the weapon closer. Finish it. Adrian picked up the gun. Ethan did not move. That was worse than if he had begged. He simply watched Adrian with the same exhausted dignity he had shown in the basement, as though he had already decided that whatever happened next would belong to Adrian, not to fear. Adrian checked the chamber. Loaded. He stepped around the table. Every guard in the room straightened. Ethan's breathing changed once, then steadied. Adrian stopped 3 feet from him. You told me there was enough on the recording to make someone kill 3 men and blame a 4th. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Mercer. Adrian. It was the first time Ethan had used his name. Mercer rose. Do not indulge him. Adrian lowered the gun. I'm not. He placed it on the floor between himself and Ethan. Then he removed the recovered drive from his pocket. The silence that followed was so complete the click of the portable player sounded like a shot. Mercer's face lost color. That file is inadmissible. Adrian looked at him. You haven't heard it. It was illegally recovered. You still haven't heard it. Victor connected the player to the chamber speakers. Adrian inserted the drive. Ethan's gaze locked on the device. You said you would tell me first. I'm telling you now. Ethan looked hurt, not because Adrian was using it, but because the choice had arrived in public, under threat. Adrian understood the difference too late to fix it. I can stop, he said quietly. Mercer snapped. Play nothing. Ethan looked from Mercer to the gun, then back to Adrian. His jaw tightened. Play it. Adrian pressed the button. Static filled the chamber. Then a man's voice emerged, clear and calm. Use Cole's credentials after the corridor feed goes dark. Another voice answered, distorted but distinct enough to understand. And the routes? Already copied. He never has to touch them. Ethan closed his eyes. Around the table, men who had treated his guilt as settled began looking at one another. The recording continued. Once Moretti hits the shipment, Cole becomes the leak. Kane executes him, the council stops asking questions, and our losses disappear with the body. The file ended. Nobody moved. Mercer recovered first. A fabricated fragment. Adrian faced him. Then explain why your office requested the West Floor logs before the recovery was reported. Mercer's eyes sharpened. You are out of line. No, Adrian said. I was ordered to kill a man before anyone could find the line. Midnight arrived. The clock changed without ceremony. Ethan was still alive. The execution order remained in Adrian's hand, but it no longer controlled the room. Mercer looked at the council, then at the guards, recalculating. You have compromised your judgment for an accused Omega. Adrian tore the order once down the middle. I compromised obedience. The sound of paper splitting was small. Its consequence was not. Half the guards looked to Mercer. The others looked to Adrian. Ethan stared at the torn sentence, relief crossing his face so quickly it was almost pain. Adrian had stopped the execution. He had also placed both of them where the system reserved its most dangerous word. Traitor. The word traitor had barely settled over the room before Mercer moved to reclaim it. Disarm Kane, he said. No one obeyed. Not immediately. That hesitation mattered. Adrian saw it pass through the guards like a current, men measuring old loyalty against the evidence still hanging in the silence. Mercer saw it too. This recording proves nothing, he said. A voice file can be altered. Victor stepped beside the player. The archive checksum matches the original index. Then the index was compromised. Before or after your office requested the access logs? Adrian asked. Mercer ignored him and looked to the other councilman. Kane has obstructed a lawful sentence, concealed evidence, and compromised internal security for an accused Omega. Ethan stood where the execution had been meant to happen, alive but not free. Adrian could feel him watching the room recalculate his value. Not innocent. Not yet. Merely inconvenient to kill in public. Adrian picked up the gun from the floor, removed the magazine, and handed both pieces to Victor. Ethan comes with me. Mercer's face hardened. He remains in custody. Mine. Your authority is suspended pending review. Adrian's phone vibrated before Mercer finished speaking. One message from Central Security. Executive clearance revoked. Victor checked his own device. West Floor locks just transferred to council control. The cost had arrived faster than Adrian expected. Ethan's gaze shifted to him. There was no gratitude in it. Only understanding. Adrian had saved his life and lost control of the building in the same minute. We're leaving, Adrian said. Mercer stepped around the table. You walk out with him, and this becomes open defiance. Adrian looked at the torn execution order. It already is. 3 guards moved with Mercer. 4 stayed where they were. Victor opened the side door. Adrian placed himself between Ethan and every raised weapon in the room. Move. They crossed the service corridor before the council could decide whether stopping them was worth a firefight. The elevator refused Adrian's access code. Victor forced the panel while Ethan stood close enough for Adrian to feel the tension coming off him. You played it without warning, Ethan said quietly. Adrian kept his attention on the corridor. I told you before I pressed play. In front of 12 armed men. You had the choice. After you put me under a light with a gun on the floor. Adrian looked at him then. Ethan's face was calm, but the calm had edges. You said play it. Because the other option was dying. The elevator opened. No one spoke as they descended. By 12:19 a.m., they were inside an apartment Adrian kept under a shell company 3 blocks from the river. Victor disabled the smart systems and checked every room before leaving to secure transport and verify the recording independently. Ethan stood in the kitchen wearing the same wrinkled shirt he had been arrested in. Adrian placed a glass of water on the counter. Ethan looked at it. You planning to drink that one too? Only if you intend to distrust the plumbing. Ethan took the glass. The corner of his mouth moved, but the humor did not reach his eyes. Adrian opened a cabinet and found crackers, canned soup, and coffee old enough to qualify as evidence. This place is depressing, Ethan said. It's secure. Those are not synonyms. Tonight they are. Ethan leaned against the counter. That's the problem. Adrian stopped. Explain. You keep deciding what safety means, then acting like I agreed. The council just tried to execute you. I noticed. They revoked my authority. Mercer has access to the building, the cameras, and the original case file. Until Victor confirms where the recording came from, you stay here. Ethan set down the glass. Stay. You don't leave without me. The words came out with the certainty Adrian had used his entire life. Ethan's expression closed at once. There it is. This is not a prison. Does the door open from my side? Adrian said nothing. Ethan walked to it and tried the handle. The lock did not move. Secure, he said. Very civilized. Adrian crossed the room. If Mercer finds you, the recording becomes a fabrication made by a dead man. Then help me finish this. By telling me what else you know. Ethan's jaw tightened. Adrian saw the answer before he heard the silence. There's more. There's always more when powerful men are in a hurry. That isn't an answer. It's the only one you're getting while I'm locked in your apartment. Adrian felt control slipping. The council, the building, the evidence, Ethan. His instinct was immediate. Close every opening before another person died. Victor found the file because you gave us the index. If there is another source, another witness, another copy, I need it now. Ethan looked away. No, people are already at risk. You think I don't know that? Then stop protecting them with silence. Ethan's eyes snapped back to his. And you stop protecting me with a locked door. The words landed cleanly because both were true. Adrian's phone rang. Victor. He answered. The recording is authentic, Victor said. But Mercer's pushing a second narrative. He says Ethan created the file to cover his own access. Adrian looked at Ethan. Can we disprove it? Not with the audio alone. We need the original call routing data. Ethan went still. Victor continued. That information was stored off-site before the system update. Someone accessed it 10 minutes ago. Adrian's grip tightened around the phone. Who? The request used Ethan's credentials. Ethan's face lost color. Adrian ended the call. You knew where the routing data was. Ethan said nothing. Who has your credentials? No one who should still be alive. The answer changed the room. Adrian stepped closer. Give me the location. Ethan moved back. Unlock the door first. Not until I know where you intend to go. Then you don't trust me. Trust is not the issue. It is the only issue. Adrian looked at the locked door, then at Ethan, alive because Adrian had refused one order, trapped because Adrian could not stop giving others. He reached into his pocket and removed the key. For 1 second, Ethan's expression softened. Then Adrian set it on the counter instead of handing it over. Tell me the location, he said, and you can leave with me. Ethan stared at the key between them. That isn't a choice. Outside, headlights swept across the dark windows and stopped. Adrian turned toward the glass. Ethan did not. He kept looking at the key, and Adrian understood too late that the next mistake would not merely cost them trust. It would decide who reached the remaining evidence first. The headlights outside belonged to Victor, but by the time Adrian unlocked the apartment door, The damage inside had already been done. Ethan stood by the kitchen counter, staring at the key Adrian had refused to hand him. Victor entered carrying a laptop bag and stopped when he saw their faces. Bad time. Ethan gave a humorless smile. Excellent instincts. Adrian ignored the comment. What did you find? Victor set the bag on the table. The vehicle outside was mine. The one behind it wasn't. He crossed to the window and pulled the curtain aside by an inch. A dark sedan waited half a block away with its lights off. Mercer's people tracked the building. Ethan looked at Adrian. Because you brought me somewhere secure. Because someone used your credentials 10 minutes ago. And you still think locking me in was the solution. I think keeping you alive long enough to answer questions matters. Ethan's expression hardened. You keep saying alive like it settles everything. Victor looked between them. We should move. Adrian picked up the apartment key. Agreed. He turned to Ethan. Tell us where the routing data is. Ethan did not move. Hand me the key. Ethan, you said we should move. So let me choose whether I move with you. Outside, a car door opened. Victor's hand went beneath his jacket. Adrian heard the old command forming before he spoke it. Stay behind me. Do what I say. Trust me because I know better. He hated that Ethan could see every word before it left his mouth. Adrian put the key in his pocket. You're coming with us. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Ethan's face emptied. No, he said. I'm being transported. This is not the time. It is exactly the time. A shadow crossed the frosted glass beside the front door. Victor killed the lights. We have 30 seconds, maybe less. Ethan moved toward the bedroom hallway instead of the exit. Adrian caught his arm. Ethan went rigid. Let go. Not until, let go. Adrian released him, but too late. The recoil in Ethan's eyes said the harm had already landed. Victor opened the service door at the back of the kitchen. Now, Ethan looked at the dark front entrance, then at Adrian. The routing data is in a private records locker at Union Station. Adrian's attention sharpened. Locker number? You get the rest after I have the key. The front lock shuddered under an electronic override. Adrian pulled the apartment key from his pocket and placed it in Ethan's palm. Ethan closed his fingers around it, but there was no relief now. Only proof that Adrian had waited until danger forced him to do what trust should have done sooner. They escaped through the service stairs as Mercer's men entered the apartment above them. In the alley, Victor led them toward a second car. Ethan stopped. Union Station is 6 blocks east. Adrian opened the rear door. We drive. The streets will be watched. Then Victor takes the river route and gives Mercer's people time to clear the locker. Adrian stepped closer. You are not walking into a public station while they are hunting you. Ethan's laugh was quiet and exhausted. There it is again. This is risk assessment. No, this is you deciding I'm allowed to be useful only when I stay where you put me. 3 men are dead. I know their names. The words cut through the alley. Ethan's voice shook once, then steadied. Daniel Price, Omar Bell, Lucas Grant. I processed their death notices. I called Daniel's sister because no one else would. I have known exactly what my silence cost every hour since. Adrian had no answer. Ethan reached into his shirt and pulled a thin metal tag from a cord around his neck. The locker key. Victor stared. You had it the whole time? I had the only thing keeping the original routing record from disappearing. Adrian looked at the tag. Why didn't you tell me? Because the locker also contains the identity of the man who gave me the recording. A witness. Ethan's jaw tightened. A man who was supposed to be dead. Headlights swept into the alley. Victor raised his weapon. Decision time. Adrian looked at Ethan, at the key, at the open car door. Fear tightened every instinct he had. If he let Ethan choose, Ethan could walk into a trap. If he stopped him, he would prove Ethan right. Get in the car, Adrian said. Ethan's face closed completely. No, that was not a request. Ethan took one step back. The sedan from the apartment turned into the alley. Victor fired at the pavement near its front tire, forcing it to brake. Adrian grabbed Ethan and pushed him into the car. Ethan fought once. Hard enough to strike Adrian's shoulder against the frame. I said no. Adrian climbed in after him and locked the doors. Victor drove. The pursuing sedan followed. Inside the moving car, Ethan sat against the far door, breathing fast, the locker key clenched in his fist. Adrian had kept him alive again. This time, there was no gratitude in Ethan's eyes. Only betrayal. You don't get to call this protection, Ethan said. Adrian looked at the locked door between them and understood that he had become the cage Ethan had warned him about. Victor took a sharp turn toward the river. We can still reach the station first. Ethan looked through the rear window at the car gaining on them. Then he closed his hand around the key. No, he said. Not together. Adrian felt the words like a verdict. At the next red light, Ethan unlocked his door with the manual release and stepped out before Victor could stop him. Adrian moved to follow, but Ethan turned. If you come after me by force, I will destroy the key. Traffic cut between them. Ethan disappeared into the station crowd, carrying the last piece of evidence, and none of the trust Adrian had spent the night earning. Behind them, Mercer's sedan stopped at the curb. Adrian could chase Ethan, seize the key, and regain control. Instead, he stood beside the car while every instinct demanded the opposite. For the first time, he understood that saving Ethan might require letting him make a choice Adrian feared, and that he had learned the lesson one mistake too late. Adrian did not chase Ethan into Union Station. Every instinct he had screamed to move, to seize the key, to close the distance before Mercer's men did. Instead, he stood beside the car and let Ethan disappear into the crowd. Boss, Victor said, scanning the curb, we're losing him. No. Adrian watched the station doors close behind Ethan. We're giving him the choice I should have given him an hour ago. Mercer's sedan stopped across the street. Two men got out. Victor looked at Adrian. And if they reach him first? Adrian pulled out his phone. Then we make sure they don't. He called Ethan. The first attempt went unanswered. So did the second. On the third, Ethan picked up without speaking. Adrian could hear station announcements, footsteps, the hollow rush of trains below. I'm not coming after you, Adrian said. That would be more convincing if your men weren't outside. Victor and I are staying at the curb. Mercer's people aren't. Tell me what you need. Silence. Adrian forced himself not to fill it. I need you to understand that I am not asking permission to move, Ethan said at last. Understood. I go to the locker alone. Adrian's jaw tightened. Understood. You don't track my phone. I won't. And if I call, you follow my instructions. The old answer rose automatically. I decide what is safe. Adrian swallowed it. Yes. Ethan exhaled, faint and unsteady. Locker 318. Lower concourse. The call ended. Victor stared at Adrian. You're really letting him do this? No, Adrian said. I'm finally admitting it isn't mine to let. Inside the station, Ethan moved with the crowd instead of against it. His bruised face and wrinkled clothes drew a few looks, but not enough to stop anyone. He kept one hand around the metal tag beneath his shirt and the other free. The lower concourse smelled like coffee, wet coats, and hot breaks from the trains. He spotted one of Mercer's men near the ticket machines and changed direction without breaking stride. Adrian had been right about the danger. Ethan hated that. He hated more that Adrian had finally trusted him only after trust was almost gone. Locker 318 sat at the end of a narrow row beside a service corridor. Ethan inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside was a sealed envelope, a data card, and a cheap prepaid phone. He had expected the evidence. He had not expected the phone to ring. Ethan froze. Unknown number. He answered. A man's voice came through, thin and tired. You found it. Ethan closed his eyes. You're alive. Barely. Mercer thinks I died with the others. Ethan looked over his shoulder. Why use my credentials? Because yours were already condemned. Mine would have led them here. The logic was cruel and effective. What's on the card? The original routing logs. Full chain. Mercer's authorization included. Ethan's grip tightened. You let me take the blame. I let them think the evidence died with you. That is not better. Footsteps approached from the far end of the locker row. Ethan slipped the card into his pocket. Can you testify? Not safely. Then send the call record to Victor Hale. Kane's man. Yes. The voice hesitated. You trust Kane? Ethan looked at the opening between the lockers. Mercer's men were closing in. Not enough, he said. But more than I did. He ended the call and dialed Adrian. Two men coming from the north end. I'm taking the service corridor. Do not enter the station. What do you need? Adrian asked. Not what are you doing? Not stop. The difference hit Ethan harder than it should have. Cut the lights on the lower concourse. Victor can do that. Then do it in 10 seconds. The lights went out in 9. Shouts rose through the station. Ethan moved through the service door and down a maintenance passage, guided by red emergency strips along the floor. One of Mercer's men caught the door before it shut. Ethan did not run blindly. He turned at the next junction, used the metal tag to trip the manual lock behind him, and forced the man to take the longer route. By the time Ethan reached the freight exit, Adrian was waiting outside, but he stood 10 feet away, hands visible, leaving the path open. "I told you not to enter," Ethan said. "I didn't." Mercer's second man burst through the exit behind Ethan. Adrian moved then, not toward Ethan, but between Ethan and the weapon being drawn. Victor came from the side and disarmed the man before a shot could be fired. The first pursuer reached the door seconds later and stopped when he saw 3 guns aimed back. Ethan stepped beside Adrian, not behind him. "The card," Adrian said, eyes still on the threat. "My choice," Ethan replied. "Yes." Ethan took out the data card and handed it to Victor. "Verify it offline. Full routing chain. Mercer's authorization should be there." Victor looked at Adrian for confirmation. Adrian looked at Ethan. "His evidence," he said. "His conditions." Victor nodded and moved to the car. The call from the hidden witness came through before Mercer's men could regroup. Victor put it on. Speaker only after Ethan agreed. The witness confirmed the routing record, the credential theft, and the instruction to frame Ethan after the shipment attack. Mercer's name sat at the center of the authorization chain. This time, the truth did not come from a mysterious recording alone. It came from Ethan choosing to speak, choosing to act, and choosing who could hear him. By dawn, copies of the verified logs had reached every council member who had watched Adrian tear the execution order. Mercer's authority collapsed under evidence he could no longer isolate or erase. Ethan was cleared of the betrayal charge, though nothing about the night felt clean enough to call victory. Outside the station, sirens approached in the distance. Adrian faced Ethan. "I was wrong." Ethan said nothing. "I used fear as an excuse to take your choice away." Adrian's voice remained steady, but he did not hide behind command. "I won't ask you to forgive that now." Ethan studied him. "Good." Adrian nodded. "What do you want?" It was the first question he had asked without shaping the answer in advance. Ethan looked at the open street, at Victor waiting by the car, at the station doors behind him. He could leave. Adrian made no move to stop him. "I want the witness protected," Ethan said. "Done. I want access to every record tied to my case." "Done. And I decide where I go next." Adrian held his gaze. "Yes." Ethan stepped toward the car. Not because Adrian ordered him to. Not because he had nowhere else to go. Because for the first time since the accusation, the decision belonged entirely to him. Adrian walked beside him, not ahead, and when Mercer's remaining men watched from across the street, it was Ethan who turned first and faced them. Adrian did not shield him from the truth. He simply stood there, close enough to help and far enough to let Ethan own it. By sunrise, Ethan had been cleared of betrayal, but freedom did not feel like a door opening. It felt like standing in front of one and waiting to see whether anyone would try to close it again. Adrian did not. He arranged protection for the surviving witness, transferred every file tied to Ethan's case to an independent review team, and surrendered his own access while the council investigated how many decisions Mercer had controlled. Then he gave Ethan a phone, a wallet, and the key to a hotel room registered under Ethan's name. "The car can take you anywhere," Adrian said. They stood beside it outside Union Station, the city turning pale around them. "Anywhere?" Ethan asked. "Anywhere. And if I don't tell you where?" Adrian's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Then I won't know." Ethan waited for the condition that usually followed. It did not come. Adrian stepped back from the open car door. "You asked to decide where you go next." "I did. So decide." Ethan looked at the waiting driver, then at Adrian's empty hands. No cuffs. No execution order. No key withheld on a counter. For the first time, Adrian was offering him safety without placing himself inside it as a requirement. Ethan got into the car. Adrian closed the door and did not ask when he would return. 3 days later, Ethan sat in a quiet hotel room with every record from his case spread across the desk. His name appeared hundreds of times. Suspect. Asset. Omega. Traitor. In the final review, someone had crossed the last word out. Ethan took a black pen and drew a line through the others too. Not because they were entirely false. Because none of them were enough. A knock came at the door. Ethan checked the hallway camera before opening it. Adrian stood outside holding 2 coffees and a paper bag. "You knocked," Ethan said. That is generally how doors work. You used to have men unlock them. I'm trying a less efficient system. Ethan stepped aside. Come in. Adrian entered only after the invitation. He placed the bag on the desk and looked at the files. The review confirmed Mercer altered evidence in 4 previous cases. Ethan's expression tightened. 4, possibly more. And you signed off on some of them. Adrian did not defend himself. Yes. The answer landed without excuse. I've submitted every case for reopening. I also stepped down from direct counsel authority until the review is complete. Ethan stared at him. You gave up your position? I gave up the part that allowed me to mistake obedience for judgment. Adrian handed him a coffee. The rest is being decided. Ethan took it and sniffed. You didn't drink from this one first. I considered it. You're slipping. I was told trust requires restraint. Ethan looked at him over the cup. Who told you that? A difficult records clerk. The smile came before Ethan could stop it. This time, he let it stay. Adrian opened the paper bag. Inside were 2 breakfast sandwiches and the same brand of protein bar Ethan had ignored in the basement. Ethan picked it up. Is this a threat? A callback. You know what a callback is? Victor explained it. That is deeply upsetting. They ate by the window while the city moved below them. The silence between them no longer felt like evidence being withheld. It felt ordinary, safe enough to leave untouched. When Ethan finished, he folded the empty wrapper into a narrow strip. The hotel reservation ends tomorrow, Adrian said. Ethan's fingers paused. I know. Victor found an apartment under a clean lease. It's yours if you want it. And if I don't, then choose somewhere else. You already paid for it. That doesn't make it mine. Ethan studied him. Adrian had learned to say the right things, but words were easy. The harder proof was in what he did next. Nothing. He did not offer a plan disguised as a choice. He did not tell Ethan the apartment was safer. He did not ask whether Ethan would remain close enough to protect. He simply waited. Ethan set down the wrapper. What do you want? Adrian looked toward the window before answering. I want you somewhere you can lock the door because you choose privacy, not because someone else chooses confinement. That's not what I meant. Adrian met his eyes. I know. The room grew quieter. I want to see you again, Adrian said. Without guards. Without evidence. Without you owing me anything. Ethan's throat tightened. And if I say no, then I leave. Adrian's voice remained steady. And the witness stays protected. Your records stay yours. The case review continues. Nothing changes because you refuse me. There it was. The thing Ethan had never believed a powerful man could offer. A choice with no punishment hidden. Behind it, Adrian reached for his coat. You don't have to answer now. Ethan watched him move toward the door. In the basement, Adrian had held Ethan's life in his hands. At Union Station, Ethan had held the last evidence in his. Now there was nothing between them except a decision no one could force. Adrian. He stopped, but did not turn the handle. Ethan crossed the room. I'm taking the apartment. Adrian nodded once. All right. I'm keeping my own key. Obviously. And you knock. Every time. Ethan came to stand in front of him. You're still terrible at making this sound romantic. I wasn't aware that was the assignment. Ethan laughed softly. Then he reached for Adrian's hand. Not because he needed help standing. Not because Adrian had saved him. And not because staying was the safest option. He chose it because Adrian had finally made leaving possible. Adrian looked down at their joined hands. Is this your answer? It's the beginning of one. Adrian's fingers closed around his carefully, without pulling him closer. Ethan did that himself. Outside, morning traffic filled the street with ordinary noise. No static. No recorded voices. No order waiting to be obeyed. The truth had needed Adrian's courage to be heard. Love required something harder from both of them. The freedom to walk away, and the daily choice not to.